there's a lot coming at you. There's a lot coming at you. There's a lot that you're like, wait, how does that fall? How does that like matter in this bigger picture? So I'm gonna have everyone introduce themselves, and then I want to get into just kind of the initial groundwork of and just laying that out for everyone. So Ziara, you're the one I can see first. I'm gonna have you go ahead and introduce yourself, give us a little background, your pronouns, um, and just why you're here.
Yes, thank you, Aleyah. Hello, everyone. Peace and blessings. My name is Ziara Kyrie York. I am the founder of Nolaway, and I'm a certified holistic doula of nearly 5 years in practice. I've supported more than 80 women, birthing folks, and families in the community. And I am also a certified lactation specialist. I'm a student midwife. I'm a traditional community health worker, an educator, an herbalist. A lot of people know me as a medicine woman. And I am a ceremony keeper, a poet, a storyteller, a humanitarian, doing lots of different work in the community. So I'm really happy to be here with you all today and excited to get this panel discussion started.
Perfect. Darryl, I'm gonna call on you next.
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. My name is Darryl Brown. I use he, him pronouns. I am currently the director of programs at IB Black Girl, just a little over 30 days in that role. I have been doing reproductive justice work for to the tune of about 10 years or so now. A little over that, but we don't have to age me in this space. Um, Hey, am identified as a person living with HIV. Um, and so that was somewhat of my introduction into this work. I've been living with HIV, was diagnosed 12 years ago, as of this month, actually. And so come to this space because my work is, I also was the only out gay Black pastor in the state of Nebraska for a number of years. And so I come to this work. My work is really at the intersection of spirituality and healing, Black liberation, and LGBTQ plus identities. And so I'm grateful to be in this space. There's a number of other things that I probably could name, but it starts to get icky after a while. So I'm just glad to be in this space.
Thank you so, so much. I will pass Leah if you want to step into this space.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. My name is Leah Wandera. I'm originally from Kenya, but I'm living here in Omaha. And I'm a certified CNA, that is certified nurse assistant. I'm also a student at UNMC doing my master's in public health. I'm also a mother. I just want to mention that a mother, an auntie, a granddaughter, and all those that I bring with. I'm a founder of Wema Health Foundation that works here in Nebraska and also works in Kenya, and advocate for reproductive justice for a very long time, since I was 15 years. And so, what brings me in this space as a Black immigrant mother that is passionate about advocating for reproductive justice. And I'm also a deaconess, which also gets my work into getting the faith leaders to really advocate for reproductive justice. And so I'm just so, say, humbled to be in this space today.
Thank you, Leah. I appreciate you. And last but certainly never least, Jaden, if you want to step into the space.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaden Perkins. I'm a political consultant, community organizer, and I'm a policy fellow with the Heartland Worker Center. I've been passionate about reproductive justice for over a decade now, since I was in high school. I also sit on the board for Planned Parenthood Advocates for Nebraska, worked diligently to pass the Right to Abortion initiative last year. Unfortunately, we got very close, didn't get there, but that's okay. I'm glad we're here today to continue the fight for reproductive justice and what that looks like going into the future here in our local and our state communities.
Perfect. So as you can hear, we're all kind of coming from different backgrounds, which is Which is the point, right? So when you hear reproductive justice, I think a lot of folks kind of turn to reproductive rights when you're having these conversations. But there is a distinct difference. So when you're looking at reproductive rights, what you're looking at is strictly the legal side of things, right? We're looking at your access, we're looking at your rights, the things that we can pass through a legislative bill. So in Nebraska, we're looking at like the 12-week ban, right? You had folks advocating and saying, hey, we don't need this. These are reproductive rights, right? Reproductive justice is looking at the whole person. How are they living, right? We're looking at the social, the political, the economic. We're not just looking at your rights, right? Like that's a portion of it. That's a part of why I Be Black Girl exists, right? We're working with Planned Parenthood. We're working with the ACLU. We're down in Lincoln doing this work. But we also recognize that there are other factors that come into play, right? It's your environment. Is your dirt in your community okay? Right? It's the economy. Do you have what you need? Do you have a job? Do you have the money you need to be able to function in this world and live as a whole person? I Be Black Girl, we constantly say that we are here to make sure that Black girls, women, and femmes can live and exist wholly as their full authentic selves, right? Every single day. We want you to show up. And we choose Black women specifically because we understand that when you help the least, when the person that is, most impacted by all of this negativity, when those folks that are at the bottom of the totem pole, when you help those people, you are then elevating the rest of your community, right? So I think in order to first ground us in this space, I want us to start off with the panel, and it doesn't have to be everyone, whoever has this question on their heart. Um, with defining your reproductive justice, like what do you do and how does it differ from reproductive rights from your viewpoint, right? Like each of us has a different role in this work. How does it differ from you? So I will invite one of my panelists into the space. I know we're on Zoom, so it's a little bit different for us. So we'll see how this goes, but I will let one of you take the space.
I can go first. So, to me, from my point of work, when I look at reproductive justice versus the reproductive rights, it goes beyond just an individual choice. And as earlier you were saying, when we look at legal protection, for me, reproductive justice, through my work, I consider the systemic barriers like poverty, racism, immigration status, all those things that would limit an individual to access or to have their reproductive choices. And so when I'm working with the young girls or women of refugee and immigration background, I look into that process of their rights to have children or not have children, they're able to raise children in safer and supportive environment. And so to me, all these components are what make up my advocacy for reproductive justice that brings me just looking beyond what are the legal protections that we have, what is an individual choice that is there. What is the frame of pro-life or pro-choice that we have, going beyond that. And so it looks beyond just, I understand it like it being rooted into human rights approach, that is the reproductive rights, and reproductive justice being rooted in a collective well-being of the community rather than just an individual. So that's what I would say my understanding is.
Thank you, Leah. I love that description and that definition. For me, it is really it's an act of total person direct service. Um, and that's kind of the realm that I for the longest approach this work from is from the space of direct service of what do I have to contribute to the total person and not just in this one area. And so through my work specifically in ministry, that was one of the anchoring pieces of our work was the total person of how do we impact the totality of this person because we know that that impacts their health outcomes. We know that their housing circumstance impacts the totality of impacts their health outcomes. We know that their access to gainful employment impacts their health outcomes. And so that was a huge piece of some of the work that we did within the ministry that I was at for over 14 years. And now I have arrived in this space of being more of a connector. So still the same goal, still anchored in the same things, but realizing that I don't have the wherewithal to provide all of these direct service needs for individuals and communities. And so connecting people to the groups or the organizations or the individuals that are doing this work to help support some of those needs within the realm of the social determinants of health to ensure that individuals and communities are healthy.
And I want to leave space just in case anyone else from the panel wanted to bring their voice in before I move forward.
I think for me, I approach it from like a mutual aid side of things. Being big on like funding direct efforts to help people, get the healthcare that they need when they need it, making sure they have food on their table, money in their pocket, are able to provide for their families and stuff like that. While, also at the same time, like reproductive rights is centered like in like the legal side of things. There's also so much more to it than just that. There's everyday people that are being affected by all these bans and laws that are being passed every single day. So that's why I like the fact that reproductive justice is focused on the holistic side of things instead of just the individual side of things.
Ziara, I see you unmuted, so I was going to let you go first.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so for me, reproductive justice is reproductive rights in action. And I think kind of bringing on what a lot of our panelists have discussed here, when we're thinking of justice, we're thinking about the whole person. We're not just thinking about what can we do at a policy level, but we're looking at the roots. We're looking at who's on the ground. We're looking at how our community is actually being impacted throughout this process. There is, I'm going to quote the late Malcolm X, who said that the mother is the first teacher of the child, and the message that she gives that child gives to the world. And so in my work in reproductive justice, reproductive health, reproductive rights, I do a lot of advocating for women and birthing folks. I do a lot of teaching people how to advocate for themselves. I do a lot of helping people to gather the knowledge, the tools, the skills, and the resources that they need to uplift, empower, nourish, and sustain themselves. And I think at the core of our society, all of us came through our mother's wombs first. And so when we look at, kind of piggybacking off of what Leah said as well about the right to have a child, to not have a child, and to raise that child in a safe and healthy environment. I think reproductive justice really touches on all of those things at the very, very, very base roots of our community, really the soil.
So I think in this conversation, like I'm hearing all of you start getting into this question. So we'll go into it, like those barriers that exist, right? It differs between states. I think that when we look at it, like an Idaho issue is going to be different from a California issue, is going to be different from a Michigan issue, right? So when we're looking at Nebraska, what specific barriers are we seeing to reproductive justice? I know my favorite to throw out every single time is the dirt. Like we look at Northern Omaha and we look at all the studies that are being done in North Omaha on, our soil and how it's like uninhabitable, right? Like, and we have kids down here, we have lead poisoning. Like there's so much going on in our community. What do you all see as like those specific barriers in Nebraska and the impact of those barriers that we're seeing in 2025? Yara, I was hoping you unmuted first because I'm like, maternal health deserts, come on and bring it in, babes. Bring it in.
So much to unpack here, but I'm not going to unpack too much because we have a whole amazing panel. But yes, going back to exactly what you stated, Aleyah, first about the soil of our historical Black community in Omaha, Nebraska, and not having access to the foods that we need. So What I have learned in my studies and in my experience as a maternal health and wellness professional is that really most pregnancy, most birth, most postpartum complications can be prevented and or treated slash managed with proper nutrition. But in our community, we don't even have access to healthy, clean, nourishing foods. There are definitely some amazing movements and organizations that have started up in response to this food apartheid that we're experiencing within the community. But that is that's just a huge, huge barrier. I think about how I believe the grocery store over there in North Omaha, the Chubb's just is closing now. That's the only grocery store for miles. North Omaha is a food desert. We also have most of the state and a lot of women and folks in our community who do not have access to the reproductive care that they need. So whether that looks like access to care providers that look like them, access to care providers that are culturally competent, access to care providers that are going to respect them and acknowledge their lived experience and still treat them fairly and justly because of that. So unfortunately, in my work, I've seen a lot of birthing folks experiencing violence within our medical system, and we don't have access to care outside of that. And so I know as we go on in this discussion, we're going to talk a little bit more about legislation, but like you mentioned also, Aleyah, reproductive justice and rights and these things that we're talking about, it's going to look different in Nebraska than it looks in other places. And so right now we have several bills going into legislation. And I know we're going to highlight some more, but I want to highlight a couple of main ones. So here on February 20th, we have a hearing for LB 676. And that is to essentially allow certified nurse midwives to practice freely in the state of Nebraska and to practice whereabouts they choose. Right now, for those of you who may not know, Nebraska is the one state out of all the 50 states. All the other 49 states don't have this problem. Nebraska is the only state where certified nurse midwives are banned from attending home births. It's a felony. And so not only do we have obstetric violence, medical discrimination, and racism happening against women in the hospital system, but folks don't have another option outside of that system. And so, like I said, I could go on. I could go on, but I'm
I was
going
gonna
to
say it's
leave it
expansive,
there.
right? Like there's so many pieces that we can bring into this. Jaden, I want to bring your voice in on the economic justice side of things, right? Like that's a major portion of reproductive justice is access, being able to work, being able to get the things you need. Can you kind of bring us into that and what that looks like in Nebraska right now?
Right now, obviously, right now, a barrier is obviously we have a 12-week abortion ban enshrined into the Constitution. So, right now, you have a bunch of people. If you're near that 10-week, it's actually a gestational ban. So, if you're near the 10-week deadline, you want to make that decision for yourself, there's a barrier on whether you can go make that decision with your doctor because of that ban being in place in the Constitution, in the state Constitution. Additionally, on an economic justice side of things, I mean, I guess the good contrast to that is that we do have paid sick leave on the books right now, and that will be in effect starting October 1st of this year. And so now families will have a baseline to be able to care for their families and their kids and take off work for medical reasons if they should choose to do so. Um, there's a number of bills in the legislature right now that are focusing on trying to undermine that paid sick leave law as well as like undermine the minimum wage increase that we just passed too, unfortunately. So we'll see if those go anywhere. Hopefully not. Yeah, I think economic justice is a big issue, especially when you have communities that are working low wage jobs, don't have access to go to the store, can't get their kids to school and stuff like that. All of that ties into the reproductive justice barriers that we face in our own communities.
So I think one thing that I want to bring in is the impact that it's having on specific communities, right? Uh, mm, all of us kind of work with marginalized communities. Like we're seeing this on a daily basis. We're looking at, what's happening as a result of, these executive orders, right? Like we're seeing these executive orders come down and how they're impacting like immigrants, how they're impacting Black folks, how they're impacting anyone with a specific identity. Um, how do we continue to center those voices in the face of that, right? Like we're hearing about all of the things going on. Leah, especially, I would love you to speak to this like on a like larger scale of how it travels into Nebraska and how it's kind of connected. But we hear all of these problems, but it's like it's 10 times worse for folks that are in these communities. It's 10 times worse for an immigrant trying to, navigate this reproductive justice landscape. It's 10 times worse trying to figure out what you can do for, economic justice. Like how do you save yourself if you're being told you don't exist? Right. So how do we continue to center these voices and uplift them as we're doing this work in the face of executive orders that we don't actually know what's going on in them?
Thank you, Leah, for just mentioning that. Um, I'll say as a Black immigrant woman, um, if you have the thought of either I want to have a child or I wish not to have a child, it comes with its own challenges. And I'll just say that as Mayan Shah mentioned in her poem, no one leaves home until home is a mouth of shack. You know, no one wishes to leave home until home tells you you can no longer be here. And so just being here with that trauma, let me just call it chronic trauma that, that either the immigrants and the refugees comes with, having that after settlement, like follow-up support is also very important when we are thinking of how will these individual, how will these partners or family navigate the system of reproductive injustice when they're thinking of or planning to even have a family or have a child or not to have a child. And when we are talking about the bills that are being introduced, and I just I hope that after this call, some of us can even just go and look into some of these bills. Like, for example, the bill on changes to voluntary and informed consent.
Mhm.
Okay, it's a good bill, but the LB 669. But think of a young woman who was trying to run home and seeking asylum here and have gone through these. And then she comes here when under CHI, she goes through screening and then she's told, hey, you're pregnant. And she wishes to terminate this. And she have to be taken through all this process. Is not going to be very easy and possible for her to be able to access, the service of either terminating the pregnancy or if she wishes to keep the pregnancy, just that support through that process. So it's not only the legal aspect of it, but the accessibility of the services that are needed. I remember when I was applying for Medicaid, uh, I was denied simply because they told me you are ineligible alien.
Mm.
And so that comes with the extent to which someone can be able to access the financial support that is needed to be able, to get these services that are required. Look into the language. We can't even talk about the language. When we go to seek services, some of us we wish to walk into provider services and probably see someone that you can relate with. And I'm saying that because we come from different culture. And so that upbringing and cultural, upbringing really it won't adapting into the new system won't happen at once. And so even that impact on how we wish to seek those services. You want to walk there and find someone that you can relate to, find someone that you can speak to, find someone. And so when I talk to some of the health providers, they're like, the refugee women or immigrant women, they don't want to open up. They
Mhm.
fear us because
But look
it's
at what you're doing, right?
yes, right?
It's a
And
system.
so
Yeah.
you want to walk in there and find a, a culture that is conducive and supportive for you to be able to access those services, right? Um, and so when we talk about the language, do we have access to interpreters? Are they available? Can they be able to do that? Talk about accessibility. I haven't stayed for so long in Nebraska. I'm like almost 4 years, but navigating the public transportation is very hard. I remember the first time I went to a bus and I got there, and then this driver is like, "Oh, so how are you going to pay?" I'm like, "Am I not going to give you?" Like, I even didn't understand how to even pay for that when I'm getting into the bus. It's just a woman who was behind me. She was like, "No, I'll pay for you. And next time, this is what you have to do." Like, even just navigating that. And I'm grateful for organizations that we work with, like Refugee Women Rising, who gave me the chance to learn how to drive. And so I'm able to drive myself to get to the services and all that. So all these navigating all these systems and at the same time trying to fight the legal environment around the issues when it comes to immigration status that it's happening, it's really impacting on how we can really achieve the reproductive justice. And so that's why we're like, let's talk about justice instead of just focusing only on rights, reproductive rights, because it is more than we can think of. And so having these conversations, looking into the bills and how they will continue to impact or continue to contribute to the injustice that is already existing. Let's try to look into that and see how we can try to, voice and be able to advocate for what we think it's justice. And so it's a lot. Like right now, I have a daughter, she just turned 2, and we were just making a joke with my husband, and they were like, um, I wish to have a second child, but I don't know if they will be a citizen here or I'll have to figure out where they're going to be a citizen. And then, as I said, no one leaves home by choice. And you see, like such kind of that. And I just want to mention that what we do locally here impacts the actions that are done globally because we are in how we are connected. I come from Kenya and I was just looking at the bills about abortion access. And there is a documentary that you can look at how the decisions that we make here, even as a state, impacts the culture. And then just one more thing, and then I keep quiet. Nebraska is one of the 9 states that actually does not have anti-female genital mutilation law in the US. And so I pose a question, why would I run away from home to seek asylum and then get to the border and then be welcomed and be promised like, hey, you are safe here. And then I get to Nebraska and I realize, oh, I'm not safe anymore. I can still undergo the practice that I'm trying to run away from. And there is so much a lot that female genital mutilation does to, uh, a woman's body. And so just having that, we are still, I would say we are trying, but we are not yet there.
Yeah. Yeah. I so one word that you kind of honed in on was access, right? We heard earlier talking about mutual aid, right? So the question I want to pose for those, especially Darryl, I'm looking at you for those who are leading an organization, who are doing this work. What role are community organizations playing in bridging that gap of access, right? What role are we playing in creating mutual aid? What are we doing in community, and how can individuals get involved in that? Like, what can they do to navigate everything going on in a 2025 before we take our deep dive into these bills? What does that look like right now?
I think that's a great question, first of all, because the unfortunate reality is that these community organizations have been left to do the work of government. As That is just the reality. Nonprofit organizations are doing the work of government across sectors, and while also having to be directly linked to government funding and things of that sort. And so we're literally on this puppet string, if you will, as we're attempting to support our communities with the things that they need. Because often they're not interested in getting in the weeds to truly find out what these communities are in need of. And so these organizations organically arise to try to meet these needs, but then funding becomes an issue. And then we have to seek the support in order to do what is necessary within these communities. Ways to get involved, shameless plug. One of the goals of IB Black Girl is that we will be a political hub, a political home for folks within community. And so finding your people is essential for getting involved, knowing what is happening within the political landscape, within your neighborhood. We really are living in a time where we don't even know our neighbors, right? We don't know their names. We don't know. We have been successful at moving so far away from community connection that when it's time to rally together, it takes so much more work to rally people together because that connection is just not there. We have really lost the connection that really is part of our indigenous ways of knowing and being, right?
Yeah.
We are connection is how we move, relationship is how we establish ourselves, it's how we do it's how we, and when I say we, I'm speaking of Black folks, I'm speaking of people of color, it's how we do business, it's how we show up. And so um that lack of connection is so impactful because so many things are happening that people are just literally not aware of. I think that when we watch how this political landscape shifts and the pendulum moves from one end to the other, and it seems like we often think that people are just so blind
Yeah.
to it. I think it's just because they're unaware. And I think that that has something to do with people not finding community and not being connected. Um, I'm saying very basic things, but we don't sit down for dinner together as a family anymore. Some
Yeah.
of these conversations used to be dinner table conversations that we would learn the perspective of our parents, of our siblings, and we were then able to go out in community with those perspectives. We don't have that within the household. Everybody's eating separate times, eating separate places. Everybody's on the move. This capitalistic mindset has us constantly on the go, 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 and we don't have time to sit and to pause. And so my recommendation to your question is find your people. Find the people that are engaging in the work because we can't all hold politics, food deserts. Like we can't all hold all of that as individuals, right? Somebody's got to hold it. But we can be connected to the folks that are holding it and supporting it and staying aware and staying connected. And so organizations like Inclusive Communities organizations, such as IB Black Girl. I'm just throwing out a couple of. There's so many orgs and things represented here on this call, but finding your people is essential to staying engaged and knowing what's happening.
I would love to kind of touch on that question as well, if I may.
Please do.
I'm okay. Yeah, so just piggybacking off of what you're saying, Darryl, I completely agree. In this time, especially, we have to be finding our people, y'all. Policy is going to do what policy is going to do. The legislators are going to move how the legislators are going to move. But at the grassroots level, there have always been people on the ground doing the work, and there will always be people on the ground doing the work. Back when I was doing my midwifery apprenticeship with a traditional elder midwife in Atlanta, I had the opportunity to be a volunteer harvester at a community garden in a community called Hartnett Community. And this community it's like the last standing historical Black community in Atlanta. And historically, without getting too deep into the history of this other community, but again, like Leah said, we are very much all connected and all these things affect another thing. But when Atlanta closed the only open school within this historic Black community in order to open several new elementary schools on the other side of Atlanta, the people banded together and they opened up their own school. They started their own sports leagues. They built their own pond so that the kids would have a place to swim because they couldn't swim at the white pools. So all that is to say, the network has always been there. The people have always been there, and we're always going to be here doing the work. So, yeah, just again, going back to what you said, Darryl, building those connections with people, with organizations is so, so, so important during this time. Uh, I want to say, I want to use this word because I think it is what it is, right? We have to become the Underground Railroad. We have to continue the Underground Railroad. We have to continue doing the work because no matter what happens on a policy level, again, there's people here who are doing the work and who are going to be here doing the work in communities. So
I did this panel at some point last year that was like voter registration panel. And one of the things I was talking about is how community is currency, right? Like we create our own funding, we create everything like, and it doesn't even just be, it's not just money, right? Community is currency when you're showing up to the legislature in large groups and saying, hey, we hate what you're doing, right? Like it's taking that bus down to Lincoln, it's getting folks writing letters, like community is currency. Money talks, community talks. And I think remembering that and keeping that in the forefront of your mind is really important, especially right now, because I think community feels silenced. I think a lot of folks are feeling like they can't use that voice just because you don't want to hear about DEI every day when you're trying to talk about your life issues. You don't want to have to be in the legislature standing up on a mic, like explaining why you matter in this space, right? You don't want to have those conversations every single day. Um, and I think this is the perfect, we're bridging the gap over to this because we've been bringing it up, talking about these legislative bills, right? There are quite a few. So a couple of the ones that we as a panel kind of talked about were the good and the bad. I call it the good, bad, and the ugly, right? So we have three separate bills right now that are looking to continue this push to limit access to abortion care. So that is LB 512, which had to do with the chemical abortion pill. LB 632, which I believe was the disposal of remains bill. And then LB 669, which essentially just makes it harder for folks to get the care that they want because they're going through this longer process of answering all of these invasive questions and trying to do all of this different stuff, right? But on the flip side, we have things like, and again, another shameless plug, we have things like LB 701, which is doula reimbursement, LB IB Black Girls priority bill. We have a hearing on 228, 130 HHS, if you're wondering. But like we have those bills. We have the 676, which Ziara was kind of talking about earlier, which is the midwives bill. So when we're looking at all of this and we're looking at all of these bills, like what is that potential impact on Nebraskans and like the long-term consequences or the long-term benefits of some of the things? And before we get into this, Veronica, I want to time check me because I've been watching the clock. I'm like, where are we at? I think we have like 7 minutes. So I can't remember what we said.
we're
Okay. Okay, 7 minutes. Perfect. Excellent. Great. Um, I'm actually going to ask the whole panel to engage because I think each of us have kind of touched on these things. So, um, we're going to keep it real short, minute or less, 2 minutes or less. Just kind of, what are you seeing from looking at these bills? What are you feeling in looking at what's coming out of the Nebraska legislature in 2025?
I'm only diving in because you happen to have mentioned doula reimbursement, and so
Didn't I? Didn't you
that
hear that? Doula reimbursement, LB 701.
absolutely. So, I think to speak to the importance of that and what the impact of that can be, what we know historically, what we know by data, what we know based on our indigenous ways of knowing and being is that doula work, midwifery work is critical to the birthing process, has a great impact to the birthing process. And what we've seen in this political landscape and in the healthcare landscape is that they have kind of been boxed out of that process. And particularly for Black folks and people of color, that is particularly impactful. I mean, all folks, I recommend that all folks have doulas and midwives and things of that sort. But what I know to be true is that this is something that is near and dear to our ways of knowing and being. And so this bill is about reimbursement for those individuals that are providing those services, because what we can't people can't afford. There's a long I'm trying to make this brief. What we know is that black women are some of the most educated people in the country, but only make 60 cents to a dollar in comparison to a white man in the same role. And so education is not always the pathway to financial sustainability. And so people can't afford to have all of these folks on their care team, and to pay out of pocket. And so it needs to be covered by insurance. And one of the first steps to that is to ensure that it is at least reimbursed by way of Medicaid. And so, um, and that there are other funding streams right now that are supporting doula work right now, but we want to be sure that it's locked in where insurance companies are reimbursing doulas, so the doulas are getting the funding that they need, and so the mothers and birthing people are getting the care that they need. And so that's just one of the things, one of the ways that we can see some impact to birthing outcomes. So I'll digress for the second time.
I think, as you said, Aleyah, we're seeing like the good, bad, and the ugly of, what's coming out of in terms of reproductive justice and the future of that here in our state by seeing these bills that are providing for doula reimbursement, providing support for midwives, and other good things, while also seeing more bills to try to restrict access to reproductive care at the same time. So, from my perspective, I'm like, as a state, if they're going to go by the way of banning abortion after 12 weeks, 10, 12 weeks, whatever it is, and then pushing to restrict it more, let's focus on our energy on like harm reduction by supporting these good bills that are providing for better birth outcomes in the long run if they're going to force people to have kids against their will in the first place. Not that it's, any better, but just from a harm reduction side of things, I think it's just a good thing to focus the energy on those things.
There's so much I could say here, but gonna keep it real short. As a certified holistic doula of 5 years in practice, yes, please reimburse doulas. Would love it if you all could support this bill. And I just want to say shout out to Ivy Black Girl for pushing that forward and for also pushing it forward in a way that truly does offer sustainability in practice to doulas, because a lot of states are adopting Medicaid for doulas and it's really not a sustainable structure of compensation. So definitely appreciate that. And yeah, just again, going back to what reproductive justice is, the right to not have kids, to have kids, and to raise kids in a safe and healthy environment. So, and again, kind of touching on what Jaden said as well, harm reduction. So Black women, Indigenous women, depending on your local area, are anywhere from 2 to 12 times more likely to die during childbirth in this country than white women. And these disparities, like was stated by Darryl, these go beyond our socioeconomic status. These goes beyond our education levels. This has to do with medical discrimination, neglect, and racism. This has to do with obstetric violence. This has to do with what birthing folks are experiencing in the system. And at this time in Nebraska, we don't have another legal recognized option. And so again, going back to LB 676, for repealing the bans on home births and midwifery in this state. Would love it if you all could support that, because this is going to make a huge difference. Black women and Indigenous women are not 2 to 12 times more likely to die during childbirth when they birth in out-of-hospital settings and receive access to culturally competent, personalized care. Meaning, once again, this is not an issue of socioeconomic status, of education. This is not an issue even of race, but this, or as in genetics, right? Because some doctors like to try to throw that out there, like, oh, this is just, you guys are just more likely to have these disparities. No, it's not true. Because when we birth outside of the system, these things aren't happening. And so it's the system that's killing us. So we need to have other options outside of the system. We need to not be restricted on what we have access to, right? But again, and I say, because I'm kind of radical like that, Shaw, we are always going to be doing the work regardless of what is happening. There are always going to be options. You're always going to have access to these things. I just want to say, because I am an advocate and an educator of people on their rights. So I want you all to know that regardless of what happens in legislation, you can go out and get these things for yourself. But yeah, as far as these bills go, these bills coming up could have some potential to make a real big impact in this state and get a lot of folks access to the care and support that they really need and deserve. By eliminating some of these geographic transportation barriers, some of these economic barriers, and some of these barriers to receiving culturally competent care, safe care.
Can I just say something shortly? Sorry.
Yeah, please, Leah. I was going to say, wrap us out, Leah.
I'll say yes to the positive bills that we are having. Yes to supporting the reimbursement for our doulas. I just want to add another bill in our list to look at, the LB 53, the Protection from Prosecution for Pregnancy Outcomes. And I say this because
I think that's Senator
sometimes,
Kavanaugh, right? I
what?
want to say that's Senator Kavanaugh's bill for folks
Yes,
looking. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. One thing that I have really been looking so much into, especially working with the women and girls of refugee and immigration background, uh, I know sometimes we focus on maternal mortality rates, but we also need to think about the severe morbidity that comes with birthing process, because it is really increasing so much right now, and the rate is going so much higher than mortality rates, because we are focusing on, oh, we don't want to lose this person, but then what are the impacts that this person will remain living with? And so some of these bills that when we look into, we also need to interrogate and look into what are the severe morbidity issues that some of these bills will cause to birthing people. And looking into that will help us, like, when we are voicing our concerns about these issues, it's very important, because women of color, that are 27% high risk of having the severe morbidity issues than compared to the white folks. And so it's something that, and also it's because of the accessibility to the services that when we are talking about the reproductive justice issues that we are talking about. And so I would say it's just an invitation call. Let's expand our thoughts and how we look at these bills. It's not all about an individual choice. It's about the collectivity well-being of each and every person. Because I'm a woman, as Ubuntu says, I am because you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so because you are, so I am. I can't exist in a very long space. I coexist and we breathe together. So let's continue holding each other's breath and be able to breathe together.
Thank you for wrapping us up so beautifully, Leah. That was wonderful. I think we'll probably be able to give a piece at the end, but I know we're a little bit over time and want to get into breakout rooms. So, Veronica, I'm going to pass it back over to you for now.
Okay, I see Maddie.
Hello. Our group was rather small, but we talked a lot about how we really appreciate the educators we had today sharing their experiences with us, and how we felt that we had a lack of awareness of those issues. And we can also think of other people that might have lack of awareness of those issues that we'd like to share this knowledge with, whether it just be starting conversations or sharing the YouTube video of this panel, and looking at the bills, how we think they're very important, but sometimes it seems designed to kind of overwhelm people, like just how we spend our time, if we have time to comment and advocate for every bill, can be a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it is a lot. And I think it is by, sometimes it is by design. Uh, who would like to go next? Oh, I see a hand up. Lucia will unmute you.
Stacey, you're unmuted.
All right. Yes. I don't know which number group we're with, but one of the things that we really noticed was the kind of education aspect of the whole issue, helping people understand what the situation is, what their options are within the situation. A lot of times we can empower ourselves simply by moving past obstacles, regardless of what the world around us says or does. And a lot of times people don't know that they can do that. So providing education to help them meet those needs that provide that stable home environment that make everything else work. So that's one of probably our biggest takeaway that we grabbed.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Stacy. Someone from the other groups, just raise your hand. Oh, I think Suzanne, are you raising your hand? Yes. Okay, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
I couldn't find the button to raise my hand on Zoom. We talked about, we were very moved by all the legislation that's being introduced, and talked about the power of our voice, of speaking up and commenting or going to hearings, and that we still have a lot of power that we maybe aren't realizing we had. And we weren't aware that there were so many bills related to reproductive justice being introduced this year. So that was very helpful. It's our quick takeaway.
Great, thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, and thank you for the work to folks like Ivy Black Girl and other organizations doing all this legislative work to make sure that those things are being proposed. One more group, I don't know what number or who was in it, but if somebody could either raise their hand actually or in the digital way, please do so and we'll unmute you. Also, no pressure. I don't see anybody raising
There
their
we go.
hand. Yeah.
Haley here. I think we were in group three. Overall, general speaking, we really talked about what is in our control, and for the things that we do have in our control, focus on then how we can make change. But the things that are not in our control, we have to find a way to like not let that seriously affect us. Um, and if it's not in our control, then like maybe we can slowly find a way to find power in that. And then we also kind of chatted about if we have the opportunity, we need to take up space. And what we mean by that is if we find ourselves in rooms and we're not necessarily agreeing with everything being said, we need to utilize meetings like this and take verbiage from our panelists and from other people here today to then bring that knowledge into that space so we can expand the things that were mentioned here today even further.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, it's just about even if you don't know everything, you know what you know and sharing that and connecting and like Darryl said, like finding those communities. So you don't have to know everything, but you find your people, you find your community. So really appreciate that. We have just a few minutes. So if our panelists have any other final thoughts or calls to action, we just have about 5 minutes. And then we'll put kind of the final comments and wrap up the conversation. So I hand it back to our amazing panel. If anybody wants to come off mute and share any other final thoughts in just a few brief moments.
And for the panel, I know we have given a lot of like heavy information. So if we want to just leave everybody with like a message of hope or healing or whatever you feel that they need moving forward in this work, I would love to hear it because I know each of you has such wisdom that you bring into this space. And I want to thank you again for being here, for using your voices, for all of the work you're doing in community. You guys are all very incredible. So I would love to hear your message of hope and healing to everyone.
Okay, I'll go first. So 2 weeks ago, we had a legislative bill hearing for LB 374. I didn't touch on this one because it's already passed, but I want to share it real briefly to give y'all some hope and inspiration. So a couple weeks ago, we had LB 374, which was the Licensed Midwives Practice Act. Nebraska is one of 12 states that does not recognize certified professional midwives. I'm not going to get into the difference between CNMs and CPNs, but we have many kinds of midwives. There are more kinds of midwives than just the bill, the midwives that are being addressed in the bill tomorrow. So 2 weeks ago, we had the Licensed Midwives Practice Act to essentially recognize certified professional midwives in the state of Nebraska who are not currently recognized. There's no path for licensure, and so CPMs in the state do often, unfortunately, get tried and persecuted for practicing medicine and midwifery without a license. So 2 weeks ago, y'all, we had over 100 people gathered at the state capitol in support of this bill, LB 374, to recognize CPMs in Nebraska. We overloaded the Health and Human Services room. We filled up another overflow room and another overflow room full of supporters. We had 30 people tested, I think more than 30 people testify in proponent as a proponent of the bill, and we had about 5 people testify for medical boards in opposition. Online, we had 371 people give online comments in support of LB 374, and we had about another 150 people give testimony in opposition. So I just say that to say that standing up in front of the legislators and hearing dozens of people get up and share how midwives can make a difference in their lives. We had young ones standing up. We had people from different backgrounds. It makes a difference. It absolutely makes a difference to let your legislators hear your voices. They read through those comments that you leave. They hear you when you're standing up there talking to them. So we do absolutely have the power to make a change and make an impact. We actually broke a record with the most testimonies ever given. The bill hearing went until almost 7 o'clock, you guys. And we don't know what's going to happen with that yet still, but I just want to leave you with that. We have the power. We do have the power to make a difference when with our voices. And that power is sustained when we come together and continue to have these conversations in spaces like this. So please continue to get out, support these bills, talk about what's going on with people, and continue to bring awareness, because that is where our power lives. So thank you guys so much for being here.
I just want to say that one thing that gives me hope is knowing that Omaha is one of those safe sanctuaries, towns or cities for the refugees and immigrant people, and for all the support that all the people working on Refugee Task Force, Ziara, and the other people working on, as much as we are not having new like families, new Americans coming in, but just that support that is going out there to help those that are already here on how to live and to survive this difficulty time. I just want to say that that gives me hope. And so let's keep reaching out. Even if you can just teach, that person one English word a day, or you can just guide them like, hey, this is how you get to go around with the bars, or this is just how you need to be careful and look out when ICE comes around. This is what you need to do, like just being our siblings keeper. And so that gives me hope, and for the organizations that continue to support and reach out and help in one way or the other, I think um, like we will win this. And together, as I say, together we can. Back at home in Kenya, we have a symbiotic kind of saying. We look at the life of the elephants and the birds. They're always walking together, and you're like, how can an elephant not step on this bird? It's a very interesting story if you look about it. And so that way of living together in a mutual way and in a very symbiotic way, even doing this work together, we can't do it alone. When we come together and hold hands, the reproductive justice issue, there's so many interconnected issues that one organization or one person cannot do it. But if we have those working on legislation, those working on economic empowerment, those working on, all those interconnecting issues, then we can be able to win this fight. But if we are just one, we cannot. So to me, what gives me hope is the small things that we do each and every day when we wake up and we know that if I'm not in this space, who will be in this space? And so let's take up that space. Let's amplify our voices and let's not keep, from doing it. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Leah. I think I'll read a quote that's actually on my board that I sit with often when it feels like the world is on fire and we don't have the power. And it simply says, know your power, wield your power, rest in your power. You're here because you belong here. So I will end with that.
I think I would say that even though things seem bleak right now in terms of the future of reproductive justice in some ways, there is hope out there, and knowing that as a community, as a collective, we can take power, uh, gain knowledge, and build collectives, and then take that into action. We've had some good things happen over the last couple of years, even though we've had some defeats. Like we've increased, what was it, Medicaid coverage from what was it, 60 days to 12 months, and it looks like who knows, this LB 374 could get passed with all the support that it has too. So there is ways to take positive steps towards good collective action for the future of reproductive justice in our state, for sure, as a collective. So that's what I would leave you all with. Thank you so much.
Thank you all again. Thank you, Inclusive Communities, for allowing Ivy Black Girl to work with you all to have this conversation, especially in 2025. We appreciate you. We appreciate everyone on this call. Just a reminder that collective action is the way to go in this world. You can't do any of this work in a silo. You can't do any of it without each other. It takes community to be able to move anything forward, and the Omaha community is one of the strongest. Even if it may not always feel or seem like it, we are always in connection with each other. So remember the folks that you've met in this space. Remember the folks that you're going to meet moving forward. Take them with you on your journey. Take them with you as you're continuing to learn about reproductive justice. This is a shameless plug. Ivy Black Girl is going to have a session next week training everyone on everything for LB 701, and everything we teach you about LB 701 can be applied to other bills. So feel free to sign up for that. Thank you again, and Veronica, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. No shameless plugs. We all need to be plugged. It all needs to be a weave. It all needs to be a web. So they all need to be connected. So thank you all. That's it. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I appreciate you. Just all the love to this group of panelists and all the tireless work that you all are doing. To all of you who joined our call, may you all be safe, may you all be protected, may you all be well held and nourished in each moment of your days and all the work that you're doing. There is a link in the chat for a little evaluation. We love a little feedback. Our next talk is on March 19th in the evening at the South Omaha Metro community college campus. More will be coming out about that in the digital space. And support these local organizations. Y'all support them with your time, with your effort, with your dollars. And we appreciate you all so much. And take good care. We'll be emailing you with more information. Bye, y'all. Thank you.